A silence that heavy doesn't simply appear. It creeps in, slow and steady, seeping through walls and hallways until every corner of a home feels wrong. By 9 o'clock on the night of October 14th, 2003, that kind of silence had already settled deep inside the Fisher household on San Antonio's east side. Laura Fisher stood at her kitchen window, her reflection faintly glowing against the black glass, staring out at the empty driveway. Her husband's motorcycle should have been there, parked, cooling from the ride home, 3 hours ago. Michael Fisher was not the kind of man who ran late. Not the kind of late you could blame on traffic or a stop for gas. At 38, he ran his life the way he ran his construction crews, with structure, precision, and a quiet pride in being the most dependable foreman in Bexar County. He left home every morning at 6:45 sharp, taking the same route down Broadway toward a job site near the old Pearl Brewery, and each evening, right around 6:15, he was back home. You could set your watch by Michael Fisher. His co-workers said it. His friends said it. And Laura believed it. 17 years of marriage built on the comfort of knowing he'd always walk through that door. The Honda VTX 1800 he'd bought earlier that spring was his pride. A candy apple red machine polished so often it gleamed like fire in the Texas sun. Most weekends it sat untouched in the garage, spotless, but on weekdays it was his ride to work, the one indulgence in his predictable routine. He'd spent months picking that bike, comparing specs, testing engines, visiting dealerships from Austin to Corpus Christi until he found the one. When he brought it home, he made Laura sit on the back seat, proudly explaining every feature, every safety measure, every reason she didn't need to worry. The helmet had been his concession, a full-face shoey, graphite gray, expensive enough to make him wince at checkout, but worth it if it eased Laura's mind. He wore it every single ride, no exceptions. It sat neatly on the garage shelf whenever the bike was home, and vanished with him each morning when he rode out. Since 6:30 that evening, Laura had called his phone 11 times. The first few messages were light, a little teasing, asking if he'd lost track of time again. By the 5th call, her voice started to tighten. By the 8th, she'd stopped leaving messages altogether, just replaying his voicemail greeting. His calm, familiar voice promising to call back soon. A promise that now felt painfully fragile. She tried the construction site. No answer. She called Danny Morrow, Michael's longtime supervisor. His wife said he was out at a school meeting until late. Then she called Michael's brother in Houston, her words shaking as she tried to sound calm. Had he heard from Michael? Any chance he decided to drive out that way? Nothing. No one had seen him. No one had heard from him. By 9:15, the clock's steady ticking was the only sound in the house. Outside, autumn had finally touched San Antonio, that first crisp breeze after months of heavy heat. The kind of night Michael would have loved to ride in. Cool air, open roads, the city lights glowing below as he came down the hill toward home. Laura pressed her forehead to the cold glass, trying to recall the last thing she'd said to him that morning. Something ordinary, groceries maybe. She couldn't even remember if she'd kissed him goodbye. At 9:43, she finally called the San Antonio Police Department. The dispatcher's tone was calm, detached, procedural. How long had he been gone? What was he wearing? Any arguments? Any history of disappearing? No, she kept saying. No, you don't understand. Michael doesn't do this. Something's wrong. They told her an officer would come by to take a report. That most people turned up within 24 hours. That she should stay calm. Wait by the phone. When the call ended, Laura stood motionless in the kitchen, surrounded by the quiet evidence of a normal day. The framed photos on the fridge, the coffee mug he'd left in the sink that morning, his reading glasses by the paper on the counter, everything in its place, everything except him. The silence grew heavier, swallowing the house whole, And somewhere out there in the dark, Michael Fisher's red Honda VTX was waiting to be found. A discovery that would soon launch one of San Antonio's most haunting investigations. The next morning, at 11:37 a.m., a call came into the SAPD Southeast substation. A utility worker named James Sullivan, out checking power lines along a service road off Interstate 35, about 8 miles south of downtown, had spotted something bright red in the brush, too polished to be trash, too deliberate to be random. When he climbed down from his truck to look closer, he found exactly what Laura Fisher had been hoping someone would find, and exactly what she'd been terrified they might. Detective Robert Keller arrived at 12:15, his unmarked sedan rolling down the dusty access road. The October sun beat down, turning the grass pale gold and casting sharp shadows across the ground. It wasn't a place people usually came. No houses, no shops, just power lines, empty land, and the beginning of a mystery that would echo through the city for decades to come. The air beneath the highway trembled with the constant roar of 18-wheelers thundering past above. In a clearing about 40 feet off the service road, the motorcycle stood, upright, perfectly balanced on its kickstand, as if waiting for its owner to return. Detective Robert Keller moved toward it carefully, his eyes scanning every inch of the scene. 18 years on the force had trained him to see moments like this, not as chaos, but as stories, pieces of a narrative scattered across the dirt, waiting to be read. The Honda gleamed beneath the midday sun. That deep, candy apple red shimmered like glass, polished and flawless. No dents, no scratches. Windshield clean. Mirrors intact. It looked almost staged, too pristine for a vehicle that had supposedly been left here overnight. Keller circled the bike once, studying the ground. The soil was hard-packed caliche mixed with loose gravel. Terrible for preserving footprints or tire impressions. Still, he could make out the faint outline of where the tires had pressed into softer patches. The tread marks were clear. This bike had been ridden here, not dragged or pushed. A single set of footprints, boot prints, size 10 or 11, led from the bike toward the road. Heavy soles, with a distinctive waffle pattern. Keller crouched, photographed them from 3 different angles. The key was still in the ignition, turned to the off position. He pulled on latex gloves, snapped them tight around his wrists, and reached out. The key turned smoothly to accessory. The dashboard lights blinked to life. The battery was strong. Gas tank, 3/4 full. Engine cold, had been for hours, maybe since the night before. He compared the odometer reading to the mileage Laura Fisher had reported earlier that morning. It matched almost perfectly. Exactly what it would be for Michael's regular commute from home to the Pearl Brewery site and back. But there was no sign of Michael Fisher, and no sign of his helmet. That detail hit Keller harder than he expected. He'd been riding motorcycles since he was 19. Owned 6 over the years, and still kept a Harley Softail parked in his garage. He knew riders. Serious ones didn't leave their bikes like this, upright, key in ignition, and their helmet nowhere in sight. Keller checked the small storage compartment beneath the seat. Inside, registration, insurance, both in Michael Fisher's name. A tire gauge, a half-used bottle of chain lubricant. Nothing suspicious. Nothing missing, except the man, and the one piece of safety gear everyone swore he never rode without. 20 minutes later, the forensics team arrived, followed by a tow truck to transport the Honda to the police impound for a full examination. While they worked, Keller expanded his search in slow, deliberate circles, scanning for anything out of place. Cigarette butts, fabric fibers, shell casings, even a scrap of paper. Nothing. Just gravel, dry grass, and the endless thunder of traffic overhead. By 3 that afternoon, the motorcycle sat under fluorescent lights in the police garage. Two technicians methodically photographed every inch, dusting for prints, logging samples, and examining the smallest details. Keller watched, arms crossed, his mind running through every possibility. None of them fitting. A man being forced to leave wouldn't take the time to park his bike neatly. A man choosing to disappear wouldn't leave the key behind. And a man like Michael Fisher, cautious, consistent, wouldn't go anywhere without his helmet. The technicians confirmed what Keller already suspected. Michael's fingerprints were everywhere they should be. Handlebars, ignition, fuel cap, storage latch. One partial print on the rear fender didn't match. Smudged, impossible to identify. No blood, no fibers, no signs of violence. Just a spotless motorcycle sitting exactly where it shouldn't be. By then, Keller knew the first 48 hours were slipping away, the critical window when most missing person cases still had answers to find. And with every hour that passed, the mystery around Michael Fisher grew heavier. Somewhere across the city, Laura Fisher sat in the same silent kitchen, waiting for a call that wouldn't come. And somewhere else, that missing graphite gray helmet, the one Michael never left behind, was holding a secret that would stay buried for 21 years before anyone understood its meaning. Keller couldn't shake the feeling. He'd seen strange cases in his career, but the absence of that helmet, that one small detail, lodged deep in his mind. During the morning briefing on October 16th, he stood before the whiteboard, a cup of burnt station coffee cooling in his hand, staring at the timeline.
His team had assembled. Michael Fisher left home at 6 a.m. on October 14th. Arrive at the Pearl Brewery construction site at 7:03, confirmed by security footage. The grainy black and white tape showed him parking his Honda, removing his helmet, and walking toward the site office trailer. Helmet in hand, the T5:37 p.m. The same camera caught him leaving, moving with the same calm, deliberate stride. Helmet still in hand. He mounted his bike, secured the strap beneath his chin, and rode out of frame. That was the last verified sighting of Michael Fisher, and the last moment anyone could confirm the graphite gray Shui helmet in his possession. The contradiction wouldn't let Keller rest. Michael Fisher wasn't reckless. 14 years in construction, not a single safety violation. A spotless driving record. No tickets. No risks. His insurance company had even labeled him a safe driver for 3 consecutive years. Everyone who knew him, coworkers, friends, family, said the same thing. He was careful. Predictable. The kind of man who checked the weather before leaving for work, who kept a first aid kit in his truck, who called his wife if he was running 15 minutes behind. And that kind of man doesn't ride a motorcycle without a helmet.